The Empire had a tradition before every conquest. They sent one ship first. Not a warship, not a scout. A single vessel carrying one diplomat, one translator, and one very specific message. A message that had been delivered to 63 civilizations over 4 centuries and had never once failed to produce the intended effect. The message was simple. It contained the complete military record of the Empire, every battle, every conquest, every civilization that had resisted and what had happened to them afterward. It was not presented dramatically. It was not accompanied by threats or demands. It was delivered the way you might hand someone a weather report, factual, calm, complete. The intended effect was not fear exactly. It was math. It was giving the target civilization enough information to calculate, clearly and without emotion, that resistance was not a rational choice. That submission was the only outcome that preserved any future at all. 63 civilizations had received the message. 63 had surrendered without a fight. The single ship that carried Ambassador into human space was therefore not a military vessel in any meaningful sense. It was closer to a formality, a courtesy. They did not expect resistance. They expected the same thing they always got, the quiet dignity of a civilization that had done the math and chosen survival over pride. What they got instead was Admiral. She was waiting for them, not in the dramatic sense, not with a fleet arrayed for battle or weapons charged or any of the posturing that civilizations sometimes attempted before inevitably backing down. She was waiting in the literal sense. Her ship was already at the coordinates the vessel was heading toward, running on minimal power, crew at ease, Admiral herself in the small observation lounge with a meal she had not finished and a book she had been reading. Once vessel made contact, she set down her book and took the transmission in the lounge rather than the bridge, which her communications officer noted with the resigned expression of someone who had worked with Admiral long enough to know that unusual decisions usually had good reasons that would become clear eventually. "Ambassador," she said, "we received your message." Admiral had reviewed her file. 38 years of service, multiple combat decorations, a reputation for unconventional tactics that her superiors had alternately celebrated and found deeply inconvenient. "Then you understand the situation." "I understand your situation," she said. "I'm not sure you understand ours." She picked up her meal again. "Have you eaten? It's a long trip. We have excellent food on this ship if you'd like to come aboard." Stared at her through the transmission screen. In 63 conquests, nobody had ever invited him to dinner. He went against every protocol his security team had. He went because the invitation was so unexpected that refusing it felt somehow like the more dangerous choice. Like there was information being offered that he could not afford to miss, and sitting across a table from someone was still the best way humans had ever invented for figuring out what they actually meant. Admiral was already seated when he arrived, the meal replaced by something hot and aromatic that she pushed toward him without ceremony. "Try it," she said. "It's coffee. If you don't like it, I have about 14 other options." He tried it. He did not particularly like it. He held the cup anyway because it gave his hands something to do while he recalibrated. "You've read our military record," he said. "Thoroughly," she agreed. 63 civilizations, 4 centuries, genuinely impressive logistics. By the way, the supply chain management on your longer campaigns is remarkable. Our military analysts spent 2 weeks on it." "Then you know resistance is." "I know what your record shows," she said. "I also know some things your record doesn't show." She leaned forward slightly. "Of your 63 conquests, how many civilizations are currently thriving under administration?" Paused. "All civilizations under administration receive full resource support and—" "That's not what I asked," she said pleasantly. He was quiet for a moment. 17, he said finally. 17 are what you would call thriving. And the other 46. Integration is a process that takes generations. She looked at him steadily. "I'm not asking to embarrass you. I'm asking because it's relevant to the conversation we're about to have." She wrapped both hands around her own cup. "Your model works. I want to be clear about that. It works. It produces stability. It prevents certain kinds of conflict. But it has a problem, and the problem is that conquered civilizations don't innovate. They maintain. And in a galaxy that keeps producing new threats, maintenance isn't enough." He looked at her carefully. "You're making an argument against your own conquest." I'm making an argument for a different conversation, she said. One your 63 previous conquests never got to have because you walked in with a weather report instead of a question. What question? She smiled slightly. What do you actually need? What followed was 4 hours that's official report would describe as extended preliminary negotiations, and that he would privately describe, for the rest of his life, as the most disorienting conversation he had ever been part of. Did not argue against the Empire. She did not defend humanity's military capability or make threats or attempt to establish deterrence. She asked questions, careful, specific, genuinely curious questions about what they were trying to build, what problems they were trying to solve, what 63 conquests had gotten them and what it had not. And somewhere in the answers to those questions, she found the thing that changed everything. They had a problem they had not told anyone about, a significant one. A star in the core of their territory had been behaving erratically for 11 years, producing radiation bursts that were slowly making 3 of their most populated systems increasingly difficult to inhabit. Their scientists had been working on it. They had made no progress. It was, quietly, an existential concern that their leadership discussed in closed sessions, and did not include in the official military record they sent to conquest targets. Found it in Hour 2. Not because she had intelligence on it, she had not, but because she was listening carefully and asking the right questions, and who was not accustomed to being genuinely listened to, said more than he intended. When she brought it up directly, he went very still. How did you? You mentioned resource reallocation from 3 core systems twice, she said, and your timeline for this sector's integration is longer than any of your previous campaigns by a factor of 3. That suggests something is making the standard timeline impractical. She tilted her head. What's wrong with the star? He told her. He was not entirely sure why. Something about the directness of the question made deflection feel exhausting. She listened. She asked 3 follow-up questions. Then she was quiet for a moment. We have a research team that has been working on stellar stabilization technology for 6 years, she said. Different problem, similar mechanics. I can't promise they have your answer, but I can promise they're the best people I know of to look for it. In exchange for what? Asked. In exchange for this conversation continuing, she said, and the fleet you have waiting outside this system standing down while it does. Looked at her for a long moment. You knew about the fleet, he said. We detected it 8 weeks ago, she said. We've been tracking it since. That's why I was already at these coordinates when you arrived. She picked up her coffee. I wanted to have this conversation before anything happened that made it harder. You could have armed, he said, prepared defenses. We did, she said simply. We also thought this might work better. She looked at him steadily. 63 civilizations gave you what you asked for. I'm asking you to consider whether what you asked for was actually what you needed. The fleet stood down that evening. Not permanently, not with any formal agreement in place. Just stood down, pulled back to the system boundary, held position while transmissions went back to high command that composed very carefully over 3 hours. The stellar research teams made contact within the week. They did not have an immediate answer. They had, within 2 months of collaboration, a promising direction that scientists had not considered. Within a year, they had a working solution that was tested on a smaller, unstable star and succeeded. The formal agreement that followed was not a surrender. It was not a conquest. It was something that required 4 months of negotiation and produced a document that neither side found perfectly satisfying and both sides found workable, which had told her team at the outset was the only realistic definition of success. When it was signed, a junior diplomat asked privately what had happened in that first conversation, what had changed everything. Thought about it for a moment. She asked what we needed, he said. Nobody had ever asked before, not even us. The junior diplomat considered this. That's it, said, though I suspect it's harder than it sounds. It always was. Humanity had simply had more practice at it than most.